Hello and welcome to another 140k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a huge thank you to Jacob Ekman for sending us some awesome pictures of his Death Corps of Krieg / Armageddon Steel Legion army. Absolutely love this army, love the models, the conversions, the different bits and bobs that have been put into it. Just think it looks really cool and unique. Love the fluff behind it, how they were the 19th Death Corps Regiment from the Siege of Vrax when they got rerouted to Armageddon, and then administrator mess-ups, and now they're the 19th Steel Legion. Just think it's really cool. Love that little bit of effort, you know, when someone puts that bit of headcanon into their regiment, the bit of fluff just makes it all the sweeter. So thank you for sending these pictures to Jacob. Absolutely love them. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page. There will be a link down in the description below. Or if you're not a fan of Facebook or don't use Facebook, you can email them to me at mordianglorytv@gmail.com. One other thing I want to mention before we get into today's video, guys, is I want to remind everyone that there is a Patreon supporter giveaway going on right now for the Mordian Glory Patreon supporters. I will be giving away either the Bastion Platoon box set if it's still available, and if not, I'll be giving away one of the Cadian or Katashan Defence Force box sets and a Start Collecting set. That is a battalion's worth of goodies, £175 worth of models. One way or another, I will be giving that away to a lucky Patreon supporter. All you need to do to be in with a chance of getting the giveaway is to be a member of the Mordian Glory Patreon. There's no minimum, there's no maximum. You could give $1, you could give $1 million, it doesn't matter. It's simply just a way of me saying thank you to my Patreon supporters for just supporting the channel, because this year has been a really good year for the channel. We're almost, we're closing in on 10,000 subs. We were on about 5,000 at the beginning of the year, so it's been, nice big bit of growth channel, and I could not have done that without my Patreon supporters. All new armies, Great Mordian Restoration Project, new terrain, not events this year, but that kind of stuff. It's all been supported by the Mordian Glory Patreon. So my way of saying thank you is to do a massive model giveaway this Christmas. We've all had a tough year, and the best way I can think of giving back to the community is with this giveaway. So if you're interested, head on over to the Mordian Glory Patreon. There will be a link down in the description below. But that is enough admin for now. Oh, one thing to mention, I will be doing the announcement for the giveaway next week. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But that's it. Let's get into what you're all here for, which is the tactic. So what I want to do today, guys, is begin the deep dive into the pure infantry tactics. Okay, for 9th edition. Now, last week I did a video covering the basics of what you want to be thinking about if you're getting into pure infantry, how you want to be thinking about playing the army. And I know I talk about pure infantry often. In many of my videos I say take pure infantry, pure infantry strong, blah blah blah. But I don't actually say why it's strong. I don't actually necessarily tell you guys what's the best way to coordinate this just massive infantry. And I do find that sometimes people, when they get to pure infantry, it doesn't quite work for them, and it's because it is a bit of a weird way of playing, and you have to sort of get your head around it. It's fundamentals, it's throw waves and waves of bodies at the enemy, but when you delve down a little bit more than that, you sort of have to be able to make sure you're planning far in advance. There's all these other little quirks and things to the army. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do sort of a few videos, in-depth tactics, actually breaking down my pure infantry tactics adapted for 9th edition. Okay? Because I think that's really important, because 8th edition was a totally different game. A lot of my pure infantry tactics, they're probably about 50% still relevant, but the way that 9th edition plays, the focus on objectives and secondary objectives is really, really different to 8th edition, which was a lot of the time you could, even at the end, you could still just get away with just blasting the enemy off the table. 9th edition, those kind of armies, they're struggling. They're not doing as well as those armies which can just be hyper aggressive and can just play the objective game, because that's what it's all about. So first thing that's why I'm doing this new series, and I'm going to go more in depth than I ever have done on every aspect of pure infantry. This will be, we're going to start the edition with this, and hopefully these videos will stay relevant throughout the whole edition. Fingers crossed. Never know, Games Workshop will probably release something that totally invalidates it. But anyway, preamble over, admin over, let's get into some actual goddamn tactics, right? So, today we're going to be talking about planning your army. First thing you got to do when you're getting into pure infantry is you want to plan your army. You want to, the most fundamental thing when it comes to planning your army is how do you want it to play? How do you want your pure infantry to operate on the field of battle? And secondly, and to be honest, what's really going to influence the first thing is what regiment trait you're going to pick. Okay, there are a few regiment traits that are really, really good, but that don't necessarily work all that well in 9th edition. So let's take a look at the regiment traits. We'll look through the original book ones, and we'll look through some of the better combinations in the greater good, some of the custom traits. Alright, so let's work through some of the main book ones first. Okay, I'm not going to cover every single one of them because this video, I've done many videos on regiment traits. Let's just go through the ones which are good for 9th edition. Okay, for me it really comes down to, I would say, 3. Okay, 3 which are good, 3 main codex traits which are good for 9th edition. Okay, first one from the main book is Katachan. Okay, Katachan was strong. It was strong in 8th. It remains strong in 9th. And the reason for it is that boards have got smaller, and the main part of 9th edition is brawling over the central objectives. That's what you want to do. Is he who can take the middle ground and hold it and deny it to his enemy tends to win the majority of 9th edition games. Okay, you don't. There are some armies, and bear in mind, I'm not saying this for all armies of 40k. I'm talking about how to do better with guard in 9th edition. Armies like Harlequins will well advance beyond the middle of the board. In fact, the way they work is they cram the enemy into the deployment zone. But that is kind of like denying the enemy getting to those middle of objectives. So they're doing it, but they're penning you in. Guard, you'll probably struggle to get all the way across the board in like 1 or 2 turns and pen the enemy in. What you want to be doing with your guard is taking the middle of the board and holding it. You need to get to the middle of the board quickly, and you need to be able to hold it. Okay, Katachans do that really well for a number of reasons. Number one, they're naturally good at being able to operate in every phase of the game. They've got good movement, they've got really good orders, which means they're good at shooting, and because of the strength 4, they're very good at combat, and they're one of the few guard regiments that can just handily take part in every phase of the game. So that's the first thing. So let's look at movement first. When I say they're really good at movement and orders, I'm talking about the fact that they have a special character. They have Strachan. Okay, now Strachan makes them better at combat, but before we even look at that, what he's really good at doing is adding 2 extra orders to your order pool. That's really important, because those 2 extra orders could potentially be 2 additional moves. That's going to allow you to take ground quicker. Okay, every other army has access to 3 company commanders and 3 platoon commanders. Strachan is an extra company commander for the Katachan. So first off, great orders. Second thing, like I said, he's helping you operate in that movement, that taking ground aspect. You can move 2 additional units, and then when the middle ground firefight starts, he's 2 additional first rank fire, second rank fire. So not only is he boosting your movement, he's boosting your damage output and in the shooting phase, and then naturally let's move on to one of the big reasons why people like taking him. He is great at boosting your Katachan combat output. You can take priests and Strachan to give all your Katachan guys in 6 inches plus 1 attack plus 2 attack with the 2 stacks on top of each other, which means 3 attacks per guardsman. Now you know what's interesting? It's a lot with the point changes and things. That can be a lot of points. It's still a good tactic, but one thing to consider is what Strachan essentially does is he gives you an extra company commander and he removes the need to take priests. Okay, you can take priests and really lean into that combat aspect. Fine, totally great. But you don't have to do that. You can just take Strachan, and he is a priest and a company commander all rolled into one. So he could potentially be saving you, 40 points. 40 points for your priests. So just think about that. So yeah, like I said, moving into combat, there are a lot of armies in 9th edition now which are making a bit of a resurgence because they're combat armies. Okay, because what combat is really, one of the things that people don't appreciate about combat in 9th edition is it's a double whammy. if there's an enemy unit on an objective and you as a combat unit charge in and kill that enemy unit and take them off objective, you've done a double whammy. What do I mean? You've removed the enemy's control for that objective, but because you removed it by combat, so you've moved onto the objective yourself, you've done a double doozy. You've taken an objective off the enemy and you've given it to yourself. That's why combat is really good in 9th edition. That's why Catachans are really good. They're strength 4, they're a natural combat army. So Strachan leans into that, and I won't go into it too much. I've talked about the Catachan strength, but that's one of the things that Catachan is really good at. Okay, now obviously we've talked about planning your army. That is going to affect your playstyle. If you're going for a Catachan style army, you want to be putting more points into things like into combat upgrades, and you want sort of less points into heavy weapons. Okay, you'll take some heavy weapons, but you know, things like flamers and melters and power swords on the sergeants, these are not wasted upgrades on the Catachan. You know, if you're going to be taking scout sentinels, because you're taking a brigade, taking some heavy flamer scout sentinels, they can scout move up, fits in with the Catachan theme really, really well. So moving on from Catachans, let's take a look at the next strongest regiment trait. Okay, now this it's a difficult one. Second place and third place, I was tied, but in my opinion, the second strongest regiment trait for Pure Infantry Guard in 9th edition is Talan. And it comes down to one very simple reason, guys. They're fast, okay? The key thing, I'm going to keep banging on about this, is taking that middle ground. Taking the objectives from the enemy. There's a number of reasons for it. No, it's a triple whammy, alright? If you can take the middle objectives, one, your primary points start going up quicker. Okay, firstly. Secondly, it starts you putting in a position to deny your enemy primary points. Okay, not only are you denying them at least having more than you if you're controlling some middle objectives, you're probably able, if it's a 4 objective or 5 objective map, you're probably able to hold 3 out of 5, 3 out of 4 objectives. So either your enemy is only getting 10 points a turn, okay, or which means they're not maxing out primary, or in fact they're only getting 5 points a turn, or for some turns they're only getting 5 points. And you could, even with a few cheeky moves here and there, few advances, you could easily start taking primary points from your opponent by just having a scattered squad just jump on enemy objectives. So when it comes to their turn, they don't get the points for it. Okay, so Talan do this really well simply because everyone can advance, no problems, and still keep up the fire output, which is really good. Catachan, when they want to move and advance and be maneuverable, they don't then get to still shoot. Talan do. Now obviously if Talan move, they can't shoot. That we understand that. But what Talan essentially allows you to do is, on average, you've got infantry which are moving 9 to 10 inches. Combine that with the smaller board, and if you do move, it's really easy for you to just get get loads of people into the middle of the board, even without orders, and just turn 1. So it's a really strong trait for that reason. And once you're on the middle of the board, because you're using pure infantry, because you've got so many bodies, you're difficult to shift off, because once you've taken that ground, even if the enemy clears that first line, the second line moves up. If they clear that line, the third line is moving up. So once you've taken the ground, it tends to be relatively hard for the enemy to take it off you. If you can take that ground quickly, you're in with a great chance. So that's why I think Talan is a really, really strong trait. Disadvantages, they don't have any special characters, they've not got an overabundance of orders, but they are able to move in advance and keep up the damage output. So they have that going for them. The third strong trait, and like I said, this is was a bit of a toss-up between the two. I'm going to say Cadian. Okay, now some of you might be like, Cadian? But they're the regiment of standing still and shooting people. Yeah, okay, that is true. But they get access to the most orders out of any regiment. No questions asked. Because not only do they have your 3 company commanders, your 3 platoon commanders, they also have got Creed, who gives you 3 extra orders. Then they've got Kell, who can give you an extra order. So you've already got 4 extra orders over everyone else. If you then start taking the Warlord trait, either Master of Command or you take Superior Tactical Training, you have really got the chance of just pumping out so many orders. Okay, so that's why I put Cajun in a third position, even though there are other regiments like Valhallands who are really good for, you know, making your conscripts, you know, those big blobs of conscripts stay on the board, and you've got Historians who allow you to get into that rapid fire range even quicker. They're honourable mentions, they're good, but at the end of the day, a pure infantry regiment needs as many orders as possible to be effective. If you're running 180 infantry, if you're running 18 infantry squads, there's only one regiment out there that has a realistic chance of being able to order every single one of those squads at every single turn. That is the Cadians. That is really, really strong. And once you've taken that middle ground, and if you're not facing a combat army and you've taken it and it's unlikely the enemy is going to be pushing you off those objectives every turn, then your trait, your rerolling wants to hit, comes in, and you're getting first rank fire, second rank fire on every squad with reroll ones. It's just really, really powerful. So that's why Cadians get a strong third from me. But Talan can do all the maneuverability stuff, and they don't really need the orders to make up for it, whereas Cadian, and their trait is in effect more often, whereas the Cadian trait isn't really in effect, but the fact you get access to these special characters is. So that's why I put Talan higher. Fight me in the comments down below. I'm more than happy for you to prove me wrong. All three of those book traits are really good. Now, a couple of honourable mentions. You know, Armageddon Steel Legion having an inbuilt 18-inch rapid fire is good. Already mentioned Valhallands, already mentioned Historians. You know, unfortunately, you know, Mordian trait is a bit rubbish at the moment, so I just don't really recommend taking that one. Moving on to the custom traits. Okay, now these are a bit more interesting. Now, there's a couple that really stand out. Okay, the first one, you guys know it, I know it, we all love it. It's Disciplined Shooters, Wilderness Survivors. Okay, the reason why this trait is so good is it combines damage output and durability. For those that don't know what these traits do, Wilderness Survivors means as long as you don't advance, your infantry count as being in cover. Okay, basically you've got Carapace armor on all your infantry, because there's a lot less armies out there which are taking ignore cover. It used to be that this trait was a bit because you had Imperial Fists everywhere. Imperial Fists have really dropped out popularity with Marine players. Really. You know, it's all about the white scars now. And someone has even been smashing face with Black Templars. So it's all about, you know, ignoring cover with shooting. That doesn't really exist anymore. And if you're going to be in combat, fine. If you're in combat, then you're in combat and you don't get your cover saved. Fair enough. But it's still really good for improving your durability. It's a really, really strong trait for that. The second part of the custom trait is Disciplined Shooters, and this gives you an 18-inch rapid fire. Now, like with the Armageddon Steel Legion, this is a really, really strong trait to have in 9th edition, because, again, you're going to be fighting over those middle objectives. So you want to be in rapid fire range as quickly as possible. But another thing you want to consider with pure infantry is that you're going to be running a lot of guys, and you're not going to have all of them, you know, you're going to be deploying in 3 lines. Not all of them are going to be at the forefront in the middle of the board taking over those objectives all the time. You'll probably eventually grind through your three or four lines of infantry, but what the 18-inch rapid fire allows you to do is essentially have even your back units, even the ones that aren't aren't at the very forefront of the combat, of the fight, they're still able to contribute good amount of firepower. I mean, when you're looking at pure infantry, every single squad, even if you give it a heavy weapon, it's still packing 7 lasguns. You've got 6 lasgun guys, and then you've got the heavy weapon team, which is 2 guys, and one of those gets a lasgun. So you've got 7 lasguns. You could also have a bolter on the sergeant. You could also have a plasma gun as your special weapon. So out of the 9 models that are able to fire, out of the 10 models that are able to fire in that squad, 9 of them have got rapid fire weapons. So it's a really, really good trait. It really extends the range and the damage output of, potentially you could say 90% of your army, roughly. It's more like 80% because of things like special weapons and officers. But roughly we're talking about 80% of your army it affects, which is really, really strong for a trait. So it's very, very powerful for keeping you constantly in the fight because you're durable, and it's very, very powerful because the combined trait lets you have quite good damage output for a guard army. Because when you're putting out 7 times 4 shots, at least, at least. You're putting out 28 lasgun bolts a turn. And then you think, well, I'm running 18 of those squads. It really is. 28 lasgun bolts. Yeah, it really is a lot of firepower. And I have examples of this in many of my battle reports. Even ones, my battle reports are summary ones, so you don't see the dice rolled. But if you want to see an example of the dice rolled, I was on the Winters SEO channel. I know I always talk about this. It'll never let us forget it. I know. But on that, my dice rolls were filmed live, and you can see the amount of firepower that is put out by lasguns. And at the beginning of 9th, I was all doom and gloom about lasguns. I didn't think that they would be very powerful. But now that I am back in the saddle full time in pure infantry, I'm really starting to feel that my lasguns actually do consistently grind wounds off. They're never going to blow away an enemy unit in one go, but your lasguns will consistently grind a wound off here and there. And that is, when you're doing that, if every time you fire lasgun volleys you take a wound off, or every 2 squads you take a wound off. Let's say it's worst case scenario, every 2 squads you fire you take a wound off something. Okay, that still means that your lasguns every turn are able to do 9 to 10 wounds. Worst case scenario most of the time. Often they do a lot more than that. But no, 9 to 10 wounds every single turn. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. And that's, we're talking about against weak units that are not ideal for shooting at. So that's a really good combo. Now another regiment trait, custom regiment trait, is Lord's Approval and Slum Fighters. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this one. It is very similar to the way the Catachan trait works, because you get good combat capabilities. The issue I have with Lord's Approval and Slum Fighters versus Catachan is you probably, look, point for point, you can probably go toe to toe with Catachan in combat. You can probably do that. Strachan can't be everywhere. He does cost points. He's the equivalent of 2 infantry squads roughly. So point for point, attack for attack, your Lord's Approval Slum Fighters can probably go toe to toe with Catachans. The problem is, the reason Catachans eke them out is because they have access to Strachan. Okay, they have access to extra orders, so that's why if you're going to pick between the two, the Catachan one probably ekes it out. But at the very least, they're equal. At the very least, they're pretty equal. If you don't like the idea of an army of Rambo, you don't like the Catachan trait for one reason or another, Slum Fighters Lord's Approval is a solid sort of backup choice. Now, there were a couple of regiment traits that when they were first seen in Psychic Awakening, people didn't think they were very good. But now, with 9th edition, I think they deserve an honourable mention. I think they do. And the ones that are, the first one I'm talking about is Agile Warriors. Now, Agile Warriors, your infantry can re-roll the advanced dice. Now, previously, I'm not bothered about that, right? Well, it is actually quite good because, again, as we've mentioned, being able to get into the middle of the board quickly is something that should definitely be something on top of your agenda. Being able to reroll that advanced dice, it's every time you advance. So if you advance the movement phase, you can reroll the advanced dice. If you advance via move in the shooting phase, you can reroll the advanced dice. So it is actually quite good. It's one that you're probably only really going to use turn 1, and you just surge everyone across the board. Yeah, it is a good way of taking that ground quickly. Which one I would combine that with? Well, there is another trait which, again, deserves another sort of honourable mention, second look at, which is Fire from the Hip, which is you can shoot rapid fire weapons after advancing with a -1 to hit. The interesting thing about that is when this was first announced in 8th edition, everyone poo-pooed it, right? Because why would you want -1 to hit? Well, with 9th edition, there are, to hit modifiers are capped at -1. Okay, so, for example, if you were shooting these guys at flyers, or anything with a -1 to hit, which is fairly common, it's pretty common, a lot of Harlequin stuff. I know I'm banging on about Harlequins recently, but they really are on the ascendancy. But, there are plenty of options for many armies out there to have a -1 to hit. Well, guess what? If the enemy has a -1 to hit and you have the fire from the hip trait, well, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because it essentially makes you Talan. If you think about it that way, in the right circumstances, the combination of Agile Warriors and fire from the hip allows you to have the Talan trait, but better, because you also get to reroll the advanced dice. There's a lot of obscuring terrain, and dense terrain. One of the more common terrain types that we're seeing on battlefields, on tournament battlefields, on competitive battlefields, on pretty much every battlefield, is dense terrain. -1 to hit. Well, if you're firing from the hip and shooting through dense terrain, you don't care. So, out of the three, combos that we've talked about, that one I think is a bit of a sleeper, and I think it's definitely one to be considered. It's no longer as dismissed as it once was. So yeah, those are the main custom and codex traits. If I had to put those in order, okay, I would probably say that joint top spot is custom trait, disciplined shooters, and wilderness survivors, and Katachan. Those are the joint top spot. In terms of the second place, I'd probably then actually go to Lan as the second place one, maybe with Cadian, and then Slum Fighters and Agile Warriors and Fire from the Hip around sort of third choice out of those. However, they're all relatively close in terms of effectiveness. They're all very, and what really I would say is the point I sort of made at the beginning of the video. I'm going to sort of come back round to it now, which is planning your army. Okay, so we've looked at regimental traits. We've gone through which ones are, in my opinion, best. I hate that saying. It sort of lets you off the hook, in my opinion. I'm not even going to say in my opinion. I'm just going to say it. Those are the ones that are best, I think. No, those are the ones that are best, okay, for 9th edition. But they're only the best if you build your army around them. All right. If you're taking a shitload of melter guns, then disciplined shooters probably isn't all that useful for you because you're not taking a lot of plasma, right? And we are in the edition of melter. So, and there are lots of ways of reducing damage these days. I think, if you've seen if anyone's seen the Death Guard article that came out today, the whole Death Guard army reduces damage by 1. That makes your plasma guns a lot less effective. And Death Guard are definitely, a good tournament army. So, if you're running a lot of melter, you don't want to be running disciplined shooters. If you're running a lot of melter, you want to be running things like, fire from the hip? Stuff like that. So, you definitely want to plan your army around it. If you're running, and I'd say broadly speaking, there are 2 types, 2.5 types of pure infantry guard army that you want to consider for 9th edition. Okay, first one is the smash and grab army, the hit hard, hit fast, die fast army. Those are your Katachans. Those are your Lord's Approval Slum Fighters. They're your combat guard armies, and their job is to take ground and just to smash the enemy at every phase. You're going to move forward. You're going to move. Turn 1, you're going to get everything as far forward as possible. Turn 2, you're going to move. You're going to start just getting into combats, just tying the enemy up, just grinding them down, operating in every single phase of the game. Okay, those ones they burn fast, but they burn bright, but they burn fast. Because the problem with those is because they're operating every phase, they can take damage in every phase as well. So sometimes those armies can burn themselves out, and you end up smashing for the first 3 turns of the game, 4 turns of the game, but then you end up just having scraps of infantry left. And the way those armies kind of work is they pin the enemy into their deployment zone, they deny them getting primary, they smash, and then by the time it all falls apart around turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, I'd say turn 4, turn 5, you just have to hope the enemy hasn't got enough to catch up on points. So that's the first one. The second army is the move and shoot army. Okay, that's your fire from the hip, that's your Talam. Those guys, they move fast, they get onto objectives fast, but they're not going to start getting into combat with people, they're there to get into rapid fire range quickly, to take ground quickly, and to shoot the enemy as much as possible. But they're fast. They still take the ground quickly. The last, Cajun can fit in there, But I would say the last kind of army is the slow grind army. Okay, the first two rely on taking the ground quickly and securing as many points as possible. The third way of running your pure infantry is either it's with your disciplined shooters, wilderness survivors, or with your Cadians. Okay, now these two armies are more focused on grinding the enemy down. Okay, your disciplined shooters and wilderness survivors, that's a slow guard army because you're not advancing. Because you're advancing, you lose your durability. So every turn you move forward 6 inches, and you might end up equaling the enemy on points for the first couple of turns. But then turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, the enemy gets ground down. You've outlasted them with your durability, you've outshot them with your volume of fire, and you have it might have taken you an extra turn or two to get there, but you have eventually got onto all the objectives you want to get onto, and it's a switcheroo in that case, with your enemy trying to score as many points as possible before you overwhelm them just through grinding attrition. The Cadians can kind of do any of those. Can either do the move fast and shoot with all the moving, with all the order. Their orders are really flexible. So the Cadian ones allow you to either move forward and just put out a horrendous amount of firepower when you've taken that ground. Not only are you first round fire, but you're also getting your reroll ones to hit from your trait. Or the Cadian one will allow you to just move and advance, and then use Force the Emperor and everyone still gets to shoot, or just move everywhere. So Cadian is the more, I'd say, the jack of all trades. So there's 3 sort of ways to run your pure infantry guard army. Those are the 3 ways. You can smash, you can move and shoot, or you can grind the enemy down to attrition. And like I said, it's very important for you to decide what playstyle you prefer. I would say all of those playstyles are pretty equal in terms of effectiveness in 9th edition. Okay? I personally subscribe to the grinding down, the slow, let's just get the points a bit every single turn, and by the end, if we've scored consistently every turn, we should win. Not necessarily huge victories, but every turn, through grinding, we will eventually win. That's my personal preference, but depending on what you're going to do will influence your weapon choices. It will, like I've said, I'll wrap it up now, guys. But if you're going to go smash, you're looking at combat weapons, you're looking at melter weapons. If you're looking at the move and shoot kind of thing, you probably want less heavy weapons. You probably want to be continuing to just have lots of special weapons, but not too many power weapons, because you're not that good in combat. And if you're the slow grinding attrition one, you want to essentially have lots of special weapons and lots of heavy weapons. So there we go, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. I'll be doing some more videos on how to run your pure infantry. We've now done the planning one, and I think the next video will look at sort of deployment and movement for your pure infantry armies. And then we'll start looking at shooting and other such stuff. But let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.